Bonjour and good afternoon. Welcome to WASA Distance Education and PLAR History. We're into week 4, and this is our second class for this week. So today is February 29th, so it's the last day of February. And just a reminder to students that you can still sign up for WASA courses by using the online application form if you don't have the hard copy, and you can contact Michelle or Candace if you would like to sign up. There are WASA course calendars available in the learning centers, or if you don't have access to the learning center, you can still contact the office and ask for the WASA course calendar. So the application form online looks like this. It's a power form signer information. You can type your name and email below, so you do need an email address. Make sure you put in your full name. For example, I would put my name here, and then you would require an email address to put in where it says email address. So make sure it's the one that you use. Or if you want to, you could also request one from the nnacschools.org email. So just let me know if you do require an email address, and I can set it up for you, no problem. And if you already have one, but you've lost your or cannot remember your password, I can reset it for you. So once you have completed putting in your full name and your email, then you simply click on Begin Signing, and you can start the process for your application form. Another thing to mention here is at the end of Term 2A, so Term 2A ends on April 12th. So at the end of Term 2A, we will have 2 student draws, one for students who earned a credit, and the draw for that is a Dell laptop, and then another draw for students who submit work, and the prize for that is an iPad mini. Excuse me. So be sure to submit your work to your teacher to be entered into the draw. So if you are working on 2 courses, for example, you will have your names entered for each subject that you submit work for. So the more lessons you submit, the more entries you will have for the student draw. To participate in today's class, you can call 1-800-465-7144. You can call 807-737-4017, or go to the Zoom link. So students have been given the links for the teachers' Zoom links. Or if you want to, you could just listen on the 91.1 FM or the Bell Express View 972. Classes have been uploaded on YouTube. So I uploaded the class from Tuesday already on the playlist for PLAR History 2A 2024. If you're working ahead of the PLAR History, you can go to the PLAR History 1A 2023. All 9 videos are in that playlist. If you're working on your geography, you can go to the playlist that says PLAR Geography 1A. Or if you're working on your science, you can go to the PLAR Science 1B 2023. And as we mentioned before, PLAR students may continue where you left off. So if you didn't complete your PLAR history from Term 1A and you have started or have completed some key questions, you don't have to resubmit or start over with the key questions unless I have specified that in your mark sheet. You just continue where you left off from Term 1A. If you don't have access to Wi-Fi or internet, you can request a USB of classes. So we just upload the classes on a flash drive. When you get it, insert it into either your laptop, your television, your Xbox, or PlayStation, and then look for the key questions that you may need help with. So for example, if you needed help with key question 20 for PLAR history, then go to the PLAR history lesson 2, key questions 19 to 21. And you could check out key question 20 in that class. There are several ways that you can submit your work for marking. You can scan your work. You can use your iPhone notes if you like, or your iPhone notes app, and then email or send it to us through Messenger. Make sure when you're emailing it that you email it to studentwork@nec.on.ca. CC it to the teacher that's marking your work. So if you're sending it for PLAR history, geography, or science, then you CC it to my email. You can also, take a picture and send through Facebook Messenger, or you can use Google Classroom. So remember, with the Google Classroom, you have different codes for if you're using your personal Gmail or if you're using your NNEC school email. You can also ask your DEC to scan it or fax it for you, if that's possible, or you can drop it off at our main office here in Sioux Lookout if you're around the area. There is a WASA mailbox on the side door, the one facing the post office. It's on the side entrance. Just make sure that you put your name on your materials that you're submitting. And if you have other concerns or questions, please do not hesitate to contact me. And we're here. If you're looking at your course calendar for PLAR History Geography, look at the suggested time frame for you to finish this section. So we're into week 4. We are looking at lesson 2, history, the Second World War and after the war. We might get a chance on starting lesson 3 today because we only have the last part of history to complete. So we will more than likely be starting lesson 3, which is Canada in the 1960 to 2000. From our last class, we completed up to key question, just double check here. We completed up to key question 29. So we did 28, 29. What was the main function of the United Nations, and what does NATO stand for, and what is its purpose? We did that. So we will start off with that in this lesson. So again, a reminder for students: you must submit the culminating activity in order for you to pass this component. You need to have 50% to pass. Either myself or your DEC will give you the culminating activity. So usually what happens is once you submit all your key questions, so in this case for PLAR history, you need to have all of key questions 1 to 18 for lesson 1, then 19 to 33 for lesson 2, and then key questions 34 to 41 for lesson 3. Once you have submitted all of these key questions, then I will let you know if you are eligible to write it. So remember, doing the lessons and the key questions prepares you for the culminating. Once you receive the culminating, then try to do it as quickly as you can. And what I mean by that is don't hold on to it for too long. Some students have still not passed or returned their culminating activity, and I know I have sent it to the students. So you might have received a reminder to say, please send it back. So try to send it back if you have a copy. DECs will also be contacting you to remind you to submit the culminating. Remember, you cannot receive the equivalent credits. Even if you complete all the lessons, you will not receive the equivalent credits unless you submit the culminating activity. Okay, so we are looking at lesson 2 in the last section, the Quiet Revolution, on page 15. We will start with lesson 3, the Canada Act and the Meech Lake Accord, on page 4. We will also look at free trade on page 5, Canadian women in politics, page 6 to 8, and maybe get to the Oka crisis on pages 8 to 9. Learning goals is that I can describe Canada's economic history since the 1980s. I can explain the impact of 9/11 on Canada. I can identify significant political contributions of Canadian women. And finally, I can describe significant events in the relationship between Indigenous peoples and the Canadian government. Okay, so keep these things in mind when we're looking at lesson 3. So from our last class, we were looking at the Quiet Revolution. And I mentioned on Tuesday, from the earliest days of Canadian history, French-speaking and English-speaking Canadians have had disagreements or disagreed about how Canada should be run and what it means to be a Canadian economy. Many people from Quebec, or many Quebecois, felt that the best solution for Quebec would be to separate from Canada and form its own nation. We saw from the conscription crisis of both world wars, so in World War I and World War II, that there was some discontent. Many people in Quebec felt their political views were different from the rest of Canada. Even as far back as the Boer War, Quebec didn't feel that they should be involved in it. They felt that it was Britain's war and not Canada. They felt the same way in World War I. And again, in reference to the conscription crisis, which meant that men were asked, or not asked, but mandated to fight in the war. Okay, so in the Quiet Revolution, we looked at Jean Lesage won the Quebec election in 1960, and he led the Quebec Liberal Party. His slogan, or his motto, was Maîtres chez nous, which was masters of our own house, and what he wanted was independence. The Quiet Revolution was achieved without force. That means he didn't try to do this with violence. Instead, it was through magazines, newspaper articles, changes in political legislation. What he wanted to do was he wanted to improve the lives of Quebecois citizens, and he wanted to take power from English minority to French majority. You can see here a picture of Maurice Duplessis of the Union Nationale. He blamed the existence of the Depression on the fact that many of the Quebec's industries were owned by Americans and English-speaking Canadians. He formed the Union Nationale so that Quebecers would have more control over their economy. And the Union Nationale won the Quebec election in 1936 and remained a force in Quebec politics for the next 22 years. Okay, the policies of the Quiet Revolution. Again, there's a picture of Jean Lesage on the right-hand side of the slide here, and he was the liberal leader in Quebec. His motto was "Time for Change." When he was elected, he began the Quiet Revolution, as mentioned. Lesage stopped the corruption in government. He awarded positions according to who earned them. He raised wages and pensions, and he lifted restrictions on unions. Under Lesage, the economy, politics, education, and culture, he did science and technology courses, which were previously under Duplessis, were now mandatory. And the Roman Catholic Church's importance declined a lot during his time. Some of the things that he specifically did was he made it easier for Francophones to obtain loans so that they can set up their own businesses. He also created a Department of Education. He changed the courses that Quebec students took, and he also made high school free. Lesage also created the Cégep system, and that replaced classical colleges, and students began to take more technical and business classes. So he also felt that they should be able to vote to leave Canada. So if you're following along in your book, you can turn to page 15. So under the heading, The Quiet Revolution. So again, they wanted to preserve their culture. They felt that they were discriminated against socially, culturally, politically, and economically. Okay, continuing on here. So the move toward independence and FLQ, that is on page 16. That's here, page 16. So Francophones began to feel a surge of pride. So some began to see their struggles against the English people like those of other colonies in the world. French Canadians received a push of support for their cause on July 24th, 1967, from French President Charles de Gaulle. He exclaimed, "Long live free Quebec." Okay, this was in Montreal. This enraged, at the time, Prime Minister Pearson, although it pushed the Quebecois on in their cause. So this happened in the 1967 the International Universal Exposition, or what was known as Expo 67. It was the Category 1 World's Fair held in Montreal, Quebec, and it was held April 27th to October 29th of that year. It is considered to be the most successful World's Fair of the 20th century, with the most attendees to that date and 62 nations participating. It also set the single-day attendance record of the World's Fair. So there's a picture of Charles de Gaulle, and again, he encouraged French nationalism, so pride in their culture. Daniel Johnson, he was also leader of the Union Nationale, and he claims that Quebec must get absolute equality with the rest of Canada. And he said, if not, separatists will win, which means it will be Levesque and Parti Quebecois. So during this time, some Quebecois formed a new organization. Again, this is in the 60s, named Front de Libération de Québec, which is FLQ, but translated to Quebec Liberation Front. Now, the FLQ were terrorists, so they didn't believe in the quiet revolution. They felt that violence was the only way to win Quebec's independence. So let's see what they did here. The FLQ began a series of bombings and kidnapping of government officials, including the British Trade Minister of Canada and the Quebec Minister of Labour. So that's how FLQ was different from Lesage's quiet revolution. In 1970, Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau invoked the War Measures Act. So what this did was it allowed Quebec police to arrest FLQ members without laying any charges. The following day, the body of the Minister of Labour was found in the trunk of an abandoned car. So you can see a picture here on the left. You got had some demonstrations. So again, they were responsible for more than 20 bombings and death of at least 5 people. The October 1970 War Measures Act, or that crisis, was also referred to as the October Crisis. The War Measures Act was a federal law, and it was passed by Parliament on August 22nd, 1914. And what it does is that the act gave the federal government broad powers to maintain security and order during, it could be during a war, it could be during an invasion, or during an insurrection. So basically, the War Measures Act outlawed FLQ. It did suspend civil liberties in Quebec. 497 people were arrested, of whom 435 would be released, and the other 62 were charged. You can see here, the picture here shows this boy carrying the Ottawa Journal. You can see that the paper says War Measures Act invoked. So again, that's a physical evidence. In this case, it's written. So you might have heard of the Canada's Emergencies Act. So the Emergencies Act, this became law in 1988. So this too is a federal law that can be used by the federal government in an event of national emergency. And again, what constitutes a national emergency is an urgent, temporary, and critical situation that seriously endangers the health and safety of Canadians, or that seriously threatens the ability of the Government of Canada to preserve the sovereignty, security, and territorial integrity of Canada. So it has to be a situation that cannot be effectively dealt with by the provinces and territories or by any other law of Canada. So according to the 4 types of emergencies declared under the Emergencies Act, it could be a public welfare emergency, a public order emergency, an international emergency, or it could be a war emergency. For example, when necessary for dealing with public order emergency, the federal government can issue or adopt temporary orders and regulations. So they might regulate or prohibit public assemblies. That includes blockades, other than lawful advocacy, protest, or dissent. You may recall back in January 22nd, 2022, up to February 23rd, 2022, so it lasted for 1 month and 1 day. There was a freedom convoy, and one of the articles had why Canadian truckers are protesting in Ottawa. So this was a convoy of big rigs arrived in the national capital, and they were protesting vaccine mandates and COVID-19 measures. So in that article, it shows as inquiry into the federal government's decision, they used the Emergencies Act during the Freedom Convoy protest, and they used it as it nears the finish line. Now, they did do a survey that found that 2 in 3 Canadians say they support, at least to some degree, the invocation of the Act. More than 1,000 Canadians were asked about their thoughts on the Emergencies Act in a survey conducted by Nanos Research in the days after Prime Minister Justin Trudeau took the stand at the inquiry. Of the respondents, 48% said they supported it, or supported the use of the Emergencies Act, and then 18% said they somewhat supported the decision. You could see from this chart, this was the question that was asked: do you support, somewhat, oppose, or oppose the government of Canada using the Emergencies Act in response to the Freedom Convoy protest? So you see the bright green, that's the people who took the survey, and they supported it. So 48%. Somewhat support, you can see that's the lighter green. So in the pie chart, okay, they make up 18%. People who oppose were 23%. Somewhat opposed, in pink, 7%, and there were people who were unsure, and they make up 4% of that pie chart. Okay, let's do key questions 32 to 33. So key question 32 says, provide specific details to describe the Quiet Revolution, including why the revolution became necessary to the people of Quebec, and what did Jean Lesage do in support of this revolution. You can remember that when you're answering your key questions, if you don't want to use the spaces that I have provided for you, that's fine. You do not have to rewrite the questions. So, for example, don't write provide specific details to describe the Quiet Revolution. Okay, I already have that, so you don't need to rewrite it. You can simply write key question 32 and then start formatting your answer. So this one has so many parts to it, so make sure that you're answering all parts of the question. So it says provide specific details to describe the Quiet Revolution. You're also including why the revolution became necessary to the people of Quebec. And then the last part of the question is, what did Jean Lesage do in support of this revolution? Okay, so first, you want to describe the Quiet Revolution. So notice that the word quiet and revolution has a quotation mark. Well, it's inside a quotation mark. So tell me why it's considered quiet. So the quiet revolution, and then put your answer there. Why do you think it was necessary? So why did they felt that this was needed? So make sure you include that in your part of the, or make sure you include that in your answer. And then the last part of the question, you want to add, so Jean Lesage, what did he do? So Jean Lesage, and write down the things that he did in support of this revolution. So I'll give you one of the hints. So remember, he made so this is just one of them. He made high school free. Remember, there were other things that he did in support of this revolution. Okay, key question 33. What does the term FLQ stand for? So FLQ is an acronym. So what does that stand for? So what does F, L, and Q stand for? And then you have the second part of the question. How did this organization pursue their goals? So that's a two-part question. You would write FLQ, and notice that's also in quotations. Stands for, so tell me what it stands for. And it says, how did this organization pursue? Like, how did they go about? So this organization pursued, or if you want to use achieved. So how did they go about doing what they were set out to do? And what was it that they were trying to do? Oops, let me just fix my pen here. Okay, it's working again. Also, I forgot to do this. Key question 30 and 31. I had it on the screen here, and I moved the slide up and forgot to do this question. These two questions. So, from our last class, we did look at what was the white paper and what did it propose, and then why did First Nations people object to the white paper? And make sure you just put in the white paper, tell me what it's about, and then what did it propose? It proposed and then write the response to that. Key question 31, why did First Nations people object to the white paper? So it was proposed, but First Nations people objected to it, and tell me why. Okay, so you should have key question 30, 31, and then we just did 32 and 33. Okay, so up next, I'll give you a minute here to change over. We are going to begin the next lesson, which is lesson 3, Canada, 1980 to the present. Okay, so lesson 3, we are now looking at 1980s Canada, where Canada gains independence, and trade agreements happening not just within Canada, but internationally. So looking at international events, and also strengthening relationship with Indigenous peoples and the Canadian government. Excuse me. So the Canada Act and the Meech Lake Accord. So Canada Act, this happened on April 17th, 1982. It was also referred to as the Constitution Act. Let me just pull it up here. Okay, I don't know what happened there. The screen just started to flash there. I think I lost internet connection, but anyhow, it's back. Okay, so in lesson 3, this is again, as I mentioned, in 1982, April 17th, 1982, the Constitution Act was signed. Interestingly enough, on that day, Rene Levesque ordered the Quebec flag to be flown at half-mast. Okay, so this was the time that Canadians took full control over their constitution, which meant that it gave them more sovereignty as a country, so control over their realm or nation. From the 1980s to the present, Canada has developed important trade agreements with other countries. So we, as I mentioned before, the trades happening not just within the province or within the country, but extending to international trade. So some significant things to point out here: that Canada has complete control. Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau initiated the act, which included Charter of Rights and Freedoms. At that time, the Queen has some political power over Canada. It also guaranteed rights of the Aboriginal peoples of Canada, and all provinces were in favor except Quebec. So the Charter of Rights was popular in English, but was unpopular in Quebec. As a result, Quebec to this day remains the only province that has not signed the Canadian Constitution. You can see here there's again, physical evidence. This case is visual. It's a photograph. There's a picture of Pierre Trudeau with Queen Elizabeth II outside the Parliament building. This one here. This was the last step to making Canada a completely independent nation. And as the rest of the country celebrated, flags flew at half-mast in Quebec, and Levesque led angry demonstrations in Quebec City. So he was quoted here. This is the primary source, April 16th, 82. There's a picture of Rene Levesque. This is his quote, "Quebec belongs to us." So that's on the newspaper. So 1984, Brian Mulroney became the prime minister. And in order to strike an agreement to please Quebec, this is what he proposed. He wanted to please Quebec, so he said he will develop something, and that development was the Meech Lake Accord. And the Accord recognized Quebec as a distinct society. However, many First Nations argued that they had not been consulted and their rights were being ignored. So one of the things that was brought up was that if Quebec was being treated as a distinct society, well, why weren't they, meaning First Nations, why were they not seen as a distinct society? So in order to pass the Meech Lake Accord, all the provinces needed to approve it. So we have in Manitoba, Elijah Harper. He was a Cree member of the Manitoba Parliament from Red Sucker Lake First Nation. He refused to give his consent to approve the accord because, again, First Nations had not been consulted or recognized in the negotiations. In the Manitoba legislature, the deadline for signing the accord approached. Harper stood with an eagle feather and refused to give his consent. So this meant that the Meech Lake Accord could not be passed. So it wasn't accepted. In order to pass it, we would need all of the provinces approving it. So you can see here on the left-hand side, it says Canadians were upset due to the general lack of public consultation. Also, Quebec, or the Quebec government, passed Bill 178, and that bill banned the usage of English on all outdoor signs. You can see here's a popular franchise, and the sign is in French because of that bill. Many Canadians believed that the Meech Lake Accord would be used by future Quebec governments to infringe on linguistic minorities. So as this is happening, there's continued growth in Quebec separatism. So support for Quebec separatism grew as many Quebecers felt that English Canada didn't understand them. Many Quebecers also felt that independence was necessary as a means of protecting the future of the French language and their culture. So as a result, there is a tension, or it created tension between collective and individual rights. There was a referendum held on March 20th, 1980. So the result, 60% still voted no to the separation, and 40% said yes. So here you have on the bottom of the slide, that is Elijah Harper. This was taken in the Manitoba legislature. He was withholding his support for Meech Lake due to lack of provisions for Aboriginals. Here's some key points. So Aboriginal people pointed out that if they were not recognized as a distinct society, then why was Quebec seen as a distinct society? Okay, so that was the inequality there. Many thought Canadian citizens had not been given the opportunity, so again, they were not consulted. You also have Manitoba and Newfoundland. They also withheld their support. So the Meech Lake Accord disintegrated. That means it wasn't passed in June 1990. Quebecers saw this as rejection and as a humiliation. So by late 1990, so like I said here, the result of the referendum for separating, it says support for separation rose to 64%. Okay, let's see if we can look at a key question here. So again, this is your PLAR History Lesson 3 key questions. It has the picture of the keys, so that indicates that that's the key questions that you need to submit. That's the ones that you submit for me to mark. If you send me the support questions, I won't be marking them because the answers are already at the end of your lesson. So what you do is when you do the support questions, you can check yourself, go to the end of the lesson, the answers are there. So that gives you feedback whether you're on the right track with answering the questions. Okay, let's do key questions 34 and 35, and then we'll stop there. Okay, when was the Canada Act signed? So this one has two parts as well. When was the Canada Act signed, and what did this act do for Canada? So remember, always your answer your key questions using complete sentences. And again, if you want, the spaces are there for you, but you can still use line paper, or you can also email your responses if you don't want to use the spaces that I have provided. Okay, so the Canada Act was signed. So tell me when that was. And then what did this act do for Canada? What did this mean? It was significant for Canada. So why was it significant? So this act was significant for Canadians, and then tell me why. For Canadians because ... Okay, the last question. Why was Elijah Harper opposed to the Meech Lake Accord? So tell me why he didn't want it. Elijah Harper. Opposed, or why didn't he agree with it, to the accord. And again, provide your reason, because, okay, So this is how you can format your answer. Again, look in your book or in your lesson. There are headings. For example, the heading for the Meech Lake Accord. So if you're looking for that, for the answer for that key question, on page 4 of your lesson book, so the heading is the Canada Act and the Meech Lake Accord. So everything under that heading is about the Meech Lake Accord. Okay, so that's it for me today. I will talk to you again on Tuesday next week. So that will be in March already. and we will look at free trade.